Today we're going to go over Socratic questioning. Socratic questioning as a method for helping to teach. Socrates, in his day, was known as the wisest man because, according to the Oracle at Delphi, he knew that he did not know. Most people are pretty certain about a lot of things. I know this. I know that this is true. Well, Socrates was said to be wise because he knew that he didn't know and yet wanted to pursue knowledge, and he did it not by merely stating things, but by questioning things, by thinking critically about points of view, assumptions, concepts, things that came up, things that people asserted. And he would turn it around from all different angles and just bombard it with questions, asking questions, probing, going further and further and further until hopefully you arrived at something that you could be fairly certain of, something that you could call the truth. Socrates is famous for having said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The unexamined life is not worth living. And I think there's something to that, and that you should know yourself. Know yourself, and the unexamined life is not worth living. So examine things, know yourself, probe, ask questions, and Socratic questioning then, when taught to students, equips them with good critical thinking skills. Now, usually when we think of the word critical, we tend to think of it as a negative concept, to criticize someone. That's not what critical thinking is about. It's not about criticism. It's about examining, thinking for yourself, and evaluating the merits of things. You teach them not just to accept what's come in to them by authority sources, but you get them to appropriately and properly think about it and to turn around and go, is that so? Why is that so? Why is that asserted? Why is that believed? Why do I believe it? Where does that come from? Is it a presupposition, a point of view? What is it? So all of these things from Socratic questioning are very helpful. It's not obviously the only thing that's necessary, but it's a very important skill to help students learn to think for themselves, to evaluate things for themselves, and to bombard things and to feel free to bombard things with questions to find out more. So, Socratic questioning is at the heart of critical thinking skills. So the information comes in, this is so. Well, why is that so? Perhaps it is, maybe you're right, but I'd like to ask a few questions just to be certain where you're coming from and why you believe that and on what it's based. Is it just because you say so? Sort of the authority model? You know, you get this from parents to kids. Why do I have to do that? Because I said so. Meaning if you don't do what I say and I'm the person in authority, there could be consequences. So basically they appeal to authority. Well, a critically thinking person can say, well, that may or may not be true, but the person in authority has said so. I don't like the consequences that would come if I don't do it, therefore I will do it. It doesn't make it so just because the person in authority said it, but being able to critically evaluate helps you realize that. All right, so it's at the heart of critical thinking skills. In Socratic questioning, as a teaching method, students must make and evaluate assumptions, relevance or irrelevance of a matter, and explanations. Okay, so they're going to make assumptions and evaluate assumptions. They're going to make decisions about whether something's relevant or irrelevant to the question at hand, and they're going to evaluate that relevance. And they're also going to make their own explanations and evaluate the explanations that are then put forward. So it's getting them to look at all sides of something. Why do you assume that? Is that really central and core or relevant to what we're talking about? Does your explanation make sense in light of what we've discovered through our questions and what we've gone on about? Then, in order to do this, what you want to help the students do is begin by raising basic issues. So something's put on the table to be discussed. Okay, the first thing you need to start doing is raising these basic issues, like, let's define our terms. I think I know what I mean by that term, but I need to know what you mean by that term. Because if we mean two contradictory things, we're going to get nowhere in our discussion. So let's just start at the root level. What do you mean by that term? Let's define our terms. Let's talk about how we're going to know something that is true or whatever. What are we going to allow in as evidence? What are we going to permit to come in? This is sort of the groundwork. I'm only going to accept answers that come from this source. Okay, well, you've limited the discussion, but I need to know that on the outset, that you've limited it to information only coming in from this source, and you're going to rule out of bounds any other sources of information. So we talk about epistemology, or how you know what you know. I'm only going to allow things that come in through my five senses. Okay, there may be other ways of knowing, but you're only permitting, for purposes of this discussion, things that come in through the five senses. Fair enough? But I need to know that that's your epistemology coming in, your basis for discussing. And then finally, your presuppositions. Is truth knowable at all? Is there such a thing as truth? What are we trying to arrive at? What is our goal, and where do we begin from? So the things that we presuppose and where we're going. All of these are basic issues, and in Socratic questioning, you begin by asking questions about those basic things. Tell me what you mean by this. Tell me where you're coming from. Tell me where you think we're going. Tell me how you know this to be true. Raising basic issues. Then, you want to probe beneath the surface of the issue. Something may seem on the surface so absolutely certain and clear that it's, why are we even talking about this? Yet, if you start asking the right questions and probing underneath it, you find, what looked solid as brick is now built on cards. Maybe we should look a little deeper and try to explore it further. This is critical thinking. You didn't accept it just because it looked good on the surface. You went behind and said, it looked good from the front, but from the back it's being held up by supports that maybe aren't as secure as we thought. So let's go beneath the surface and explore further. Next, you need to assist the students in discovering the structure of their own thinking. This is one of the best methods of the Socratic questioning, and if you've read any of Socrates' dialogues that come down to us through Plato and whatnot, what you find is that one of Socrates' greatest strengths was taking what people were asserting instead of just looking at them and going, that's ridiculous. How could you possibly think that? You're so immature, you're so dumb, you're so ill-informed. He would just start asking questions to help them discover for themselves why they thought that. Where is that coming from? Why do you believe that? And so Socratic questioning actually helps the students discover more about themselves. Why do I believe that? Well, because I was told by this person, or because this evidence was decisive for me. Well, is that a good reason to believe that or not? Maybe it is. But to question it and to look into themselves. So it helps them learn the structure of their own thinking. It also helps the students develop clarity. And this is really critical. The reason people want to know things and they ask questions is they want answers. They want some sort of resolution and at least as much clarity as we can bring to it. Now, we can't bring total clarity to everything because we're not omniscient, but we can bring a certain level of clarity to things if we think about it. So it helps the students develop clarity. It helps them develop accuracy. Remember, back to these basic issues, let's not be loosey-goosey about our definition of terms. Let's not just sort of be vague about where we're going or how we know things. Let's be precise. Let's be accurate. It also helps them weigh the relevance of things. So many times, arguments are won by basically a distraction. Something irrelevant is pulled in from the side, which suddenly distracts, and you're like, I thought we were talking about this, but oh, this is interesting. Let's go that way. And now you've lost it because something irrelevant has been injected into the discussion. It's a rhetorical device that's used, but through Socratic questioning, you can stop it right away and say, sorry, that's irrelevant. We're not going there. Let's bring it back to the main point. So it helps the students to develop clarity, accuracy, and relevance in their thinking. It also helps the students to think on their own. This is so important. It's at the heart of critical thinking skills. They can become automatons and drones and believe everything they're fed and spit it back out. That's one model. However, under this, with Socratic questioning, what you do is you help develop within them the ability for them to think for themselves, to evaluate things for themselves. And since they've helped to discover some of the things about their own way of thinking, they can say, here are my presuppositions, here's my epistemology, here's where I'm coming from, and that's why I believe these things. Very important, very critical. Also, it helps students to weigh and evaluate evidence that comes their way, conclusions that are reached by others, assumptions, implications, concepts, points of view, and interpretations. And we are literally bombarded by those things in our everyday culture. Evidence, conclusions, assumptions, implications, concepts, points of view, and interpretations are always coming into us from a myriad of sources. If they are not equipped to evaluate those things, to weigh those things, then they are at the mercy of everyone and everything else that heaps that on them. But by teaching them this method, they have the ability, or at least they can grow in the ability, to weigh and evaluate all of this information that's coming in and to question it. How good is the evidence? Are those conclusions warranted? Are those assumptions really good assumptions to make? Are those implications truly valid? Do they really flow from what you've said they flow from? Let's get at the root of those concepts. Let's talk about your point of view and my point of view. Why do you have that? Why do I have mine? Is your interpretation really correct given the evidence that we've already weighed and evaluated? All these things are absolutely critical. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about Socratic questioning as a method for teaching and teaching critical thinking skills, underneath this video you'll find a link. If you'll click on a link, it'll take you to the website that has that information, and while you're on that website, you'll also find a link to an ebook that's ready for immediate download.